pineapple.com, and I'm here today to show you a mirror image card like this one that is made with the Bird Banter stamp set, which is in the 2018 Occasions catalog. I've kind of cheated because I did prep some of this ahead of time, and what I mean by that is I've gone ahead and actually cut out two squares that were done with the, let's see here, it was done with the stitched framelits. I used the larger square, and then what I did is I took one of the square framelits and actually nested it inside to cut out two of these. One will go on the inside, one will go on the outside of the card that we're making. And then I've gone ahead and cut these pieces that I'm going to be using. The piece that we're going to be stamping on and coloring with the Stampin' blends is 4 3/4 by 3.5, and I've cut an extra one just in case I need it. And then the inner card is 7.5 by 5, and I've scored it in the middle. And then this card base is 8.5 by 5.5, and what I did is I took the square framelit that I used to cut out the inside of these squares and lined it up after putting down the designer series paper, which is the Tutti Frutti designer series paper, so that I could easily match these up when I go to adhere them and not run into any issues, as I previously found out when I made this card before. So I will set that aside, and I will adhere these pieces in just a few minutes. What I'm going to work on is the stamping, and this is just Whisper White. I am going to use the Memento Tuxedo Black ink for the stamping of the bird, and because this is a mirror image card, I'm also using my silicone mat. But let me first kind of show you what I did to line these up. I just eyeballed where to place this card in the center. It's going to line up on top of the other card that we're using, but just to get an idea. So once I put that in there, I actually just took a pencil and made a little line of where I want the branch to be so that I can see both birds within the card. And I ended up covering this pencil mark up with the ink from the stamp, so that's fine. And this is Chocolate Chip Classic Stampin' Pad. Originally I did black for the branch, but this time I'm actually going to use a color. And I'm just going to put this across this card that we have, the panel, which is the 4 3/4 by 3.5. And I'm just going to line that up over top of the pencil mark. It might come to the very, very edge on either side, and that's fine. So there's my branch, and let me close up my ink pad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp my original bird first, come back through with my stamped image on the silicone mat. And what I found is that it's not as clean and crisp as you would find if you just were to stamp this down on the paper. However, once you get the colors on with the Stampin' blends and you get the card put together, you're not really going to see that too much. So I'm going to go ahead and place my first bird. And I would use the foam sheet that we have, and I'm blanking on the name right now, from Stampin' Up, that helps you to do photopolymer stamping. And I will use that the next time I make this card, because I've made this card a few times already. So I've gone ahead and stamped the first bird. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my silicone mat, and I want to make sure that I don't go over the raised edge where the logo is, so I'm just going to go off to the side here. And I'm going to ink this up just like I would, as if I was going to stamp it. And I want to make sure I get enough ink on there so when I go to put this down on the paper, it will transfer. So I'm going to go ahead and just stamp down on the silicone mat. And I don't know if you can see that or not. You should be able to. And what I'm going to do is literally take this and place this, because I can see through it, onto the cardstock. And I'm just running my finger over this, trying not to move the silicone mat because that's going to make it actually move the ink and make it blurry. So there we have both birds. Now if I take this card panel and put it back inside my card, just to get an idea, to line it up, both birds are right there. And I'm I'm totally fine with the full branch not being seen. That way you can see it when you actually open it. So that takes care of doing the stamping and using the silicone mat to do the mirror image. So what I'm going to do is set this card base aside for just, or I'm sorry, this card aside for just a moment to let that dry before I start coloring it with the Stampin' Blends. And then I'm going to actually take my 7.5 by 5 piece, and I already went ahead and scored it. And I'm actually going to have it open like this. So I'm going to stamp the sentiment that says, "You're the kind of friend to share my branch with." And this time I will actually use the foam mat that I was talking about and place that there. And I'm going to use the Memento black ink, the tuxedo black ink, for the sentiment on the inside. So I'm just stamping that up. And hopefully you guys can see that. I've been trying to play around with my camera. And I'm just going to put that right in the middle and push down so it can, the ink can absorb into the paper. And there we've got that. And I noticed the last time that I made this card, I folded the card a little too soon, so I ended up getting some of the ink over here. So I will let this sit for a moment too, and then I'll bring my birds back. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to color the top feathers up here with the dark Daffodil Delight. This actually comes in a light Daffodil Delight as well. And then I'm going to color the beak, and then I will do these feathers down here in the Bermuda Bay. So I just come through, and this is a very simple card to color. There's not a lot that you have to fill in, and you just want to make sure that the ink is dry enough so that when you come back through with the Stampin' Blends, that you're not actually smearing the tuxedo black ink, because it doesn't give it a very good look. I found that out, as this card has been made a few times already. And I've kind of changed things up. I made another one of these cards with different Tutti Frutti paper, which the original one was this one. And I actually used a different technique to stamp the mirrored image, but found that the use of the silicone mat is actually a whole lot easier than what I was trying to do. So now I'm going to come through with the Bermuda Bay and just do a quick color of the feathers down here. And like I said, there's not a lot going on with this card color wise in using the Stampin' Blends, but you definitely can see that pop of color once the card's put together, and it goes with the Designer Series paper as well as the Bermuda Bay base. So that's done now. This is actually going to go on the front of this card, and so I will actually fold it out, open it up, and get my snail. And the reason that I made a separate card is because this will actually bleed through, and I didn't want you to be able to see that on the inside of the card when you see the sentiment. So I'm just going to put some snail on all four sides. And I do that just to make sure that I have enough adhesive that the card isn't going to remove or get moved off of or come up from the card base, or in this case the inner card that I'm putting it on. So I'm just lining that up as best I can to be in the center. So there's that. And then we're going to put the adhesive, the snail adhesive, on this side again, so the card opens up this way once we put it onto our Bermuda Bay piece. So again, I'm going to put snail on all four sides of my wistful white cardstock. I can't do that very straight apparently. So again, our card's going to open like this and then open from the inside this way. And so I'm just going to go ahead and line up our card here. And I'm going to turn this over to get this adhered. So that's the inside of the card. And then it'll close like this. And then we have the last part here to adhere, which are these pieces, these square pieces again that use the stitch framelits and the square framelits. And the square framelits, I think, have a more technical name, but I'm not recalling that at the moment. And the reason I did the little addition of this is because when you put the framelit through, it makes its own frame, but I thought I could add something to it by having a different color here, just to kind of bring together the white and the black. So I will add some adhesive to that, I'm not going to use the snail adhesive because this is a little bit wider than this, and so it ends up coming off the edge and can make it kind of a pain. Actually, just using a Zig glue pen. This is one of the very few things that I have that is not sold by Stampin' Up, and you can find it at your craft store. We used to have a glue pen, so I'm hoping perhaps in the next catalog they will bring it back. But I'm just going to lay this down here now that I have the glue on there, and I'm just lining it up with the edges of where I cut from the Tutti Frutti paper once I adhered this down. And I made sure that when I did adhere the Tutti Frutti to the Bermuda Bay, that I did get adhesive around this edge so that you can't get anything caught up between the Bermuda Bay and the Tutti Frutti Designer Series paper. So that's the outside. And then what I'll go ahead and do is go through and put glue on the other square that we have here, and that'll go on the inside of the card, and that's just to kind of add to that part as well, so it isn't just a square edge. There's a little bit of something to it, and so I will line that up here. Oh, let's get that actually lined up so that you can't see the Bermuda Bay. And I'm not worried about a little edge here, that's fine. And I will let this dry before I just hand off the card to whoever I give it to. It's just, this takes a little bit of time to dry to actually set. Not too long, but that's the inside of our card, the outside of our card. And then again, when you open it back up, and I've got adhesive and little things going on, it actually says the sentiment, "You're the kind of friend I'd share my branch with." That is all today. Thanks so much for watching.